Hello and welcome to Mastering Microsoft Excel video series. This is video number 39. In this video, we're going to talk about trim range function. Without much ado, let's get into the Excel screen and let's start exploring about this formula. Trim range, as the name itself says, this is going to trim the selected range or the cells for the operations of any formula wherever this is used inside. Now, in the last video, you learned about V stack and H stack, which is basically stacking the data one below the other or one after the other. Now, I also shown you that what happens if there are dynamicity in the data set, that the rows will be added or the columns will be added and how that will be managed. So we used the table formats and we managed it. Now, the situation what we are talking about in this video, that it's not about the row inclusions or the column inclusions. What happens if there are areas which are left blank? Completely the row is left blank because you're waiting for some input, so you haven't done the entry. So there are certain rows are kept empty. So when I say it's kept empty, so the possibilities are the initial area of the data set can be empty, or the empty is there in the beginning of the data set and even after the data set. So if there are empty rows while you're stacking up, what happens when you do this vertical stacking? And this situation doesn't arise much in horizontal stacking, so we don't have to worry about that issue. So this is a very predominant problem when it comes to vertical stacking. So let's get into the Excel screen. Let's try to understand the issue which we are talking about. All right, so this is the Excel file I'm going to use for our example. Now, the problem which I was discussing about is this situation. Watch here. This is my central region data, but there are few rows which are still empty because I'm still waiting for the information which is not yet filled in. But definitely these data will come in the near future and I will update. So when the data comes in, it should be considered. When the data is not yet filled in, it should not be considered. Yeah. So this is one situation. Now, if you see this case, I do have a data initially, but there are few more datas I've allocated on certain areas. I want to consider even these areas also during the process, but later I might add it. There are situations where I might have the data, I would have deleted it because it was wrongly entered, there was an issue inside. So whenever I delete, that should also be taken care in the collated data, the final result. So the first issue is the empty is in the beginning of the data set. The second issue, the empty is after the data set. And the worst extreme is the empty is above the data set and below the data set as well. So I want to stack this up and get it inside, and I want to see how this is going to come up as a result. So first I want to convert these guys into a table. So Control T, my table as header, and this is my central region data. So I'm going to name it as central. And let's go to the next one. I'm going to select this table and my table as header. I'm going to name this as east. And let's go to the next one. And I'm going to name this, convert this into a table. And I'm going to name this into west. So we got the tables ready. So let's go ahead and stack it up. So equal to, we stack. The first one is central. The next one is east. The last one is the west region data. Watch the result carefully. So when I hit enter, what's going to happen is you can see how the empty is treated in the final result. So this is something which I want to handle it at my end. I don't want to see these kind of things coming in. So in order to handle these kind of issues, so you don't want to consider the rows apart from your data. The empty rows you don't want to consider at all. So when I say empty, let's talk about two terms here, leading and trailing. Leading means the one which you have it above the data set. Trailing means the one which is coming after the data set. So how do you manage those? So that is the place the trim range function comes into action. So watch it. In my central region data, I want you to trim the ranges. Okay, in the central region, trim the ranges. Let me delete and write this. Trim the central region data for the it's asking, would you like to trim only the leading empty rows or the trailing empty rows or both? Now, to be on the safer side, I'm going to take it both sides. So that means this is the same thing I'm going to repeat for the next two regions. So comma, trim range, and I'm going to say east data, where again I want to trim both the sides, and trim range, and I want to say west, sorry, west. Again, I want to handle both the empty rows. So now when I hit enter, after the trim range is included in my formula, check out the difference in the result now. Beautifully handled. So the empty rows which was above my data set, after my data set, okay, before and after the data set, all were taken care because of the trim range. Okay, so that is the use of trim range. So let's go ahead and test it. If I go ahead and start making an entry, will it be considered? So I'm going to go here, I'm going to do an entry in Hariharan monitor Q1 10,000. So let's go ahead and check out in our VStack. It's taken care. What about when you add the data here? So let's say Q1 monitor Q1 and 15,000. So is it being considered? Yes, you can see here. So what about here? I can do over here. So let's say monitor Q1 95,000, and I'm gonna say here keyboard Q1 15,000. So let's go ahead and check that out. Yes, it is considered, but something you have to see that this is something which you have to manage it in a different way. Using the filter, you can handle this problem. So what is the problem I'm talking about? What happens if you type something like this? So here I want to say monitor Q1. So there's an entry made here, but I do have empty rows now here. So what will happen in the stack then? Can you see it? So in between blanks cannot be handled by the trim range. This is something you got to manage through the filter function. So that is the way you need to manage it in case if you do not want these kind of things across. But let's say if you are going to handle only the trailing and leading spaces, trim range is the best choice. But the one which is going to come in between, if you want to manage it, absolutely you need to take care of using along with the filter function in your stacking formula. All right, so with this I've shown you what a trim range function is used for, basically to handle the leading and trailing empty rows while you're stacking up the data. Or it's not only for stacking up, for even a simple sum function, average functions, you can also use them. Or when you copy paste the cells from another file or other sheet, when you don't want to consider the empty areas, you can use the trim range even over there. But I've shown you the problem in trim range is only the leading and the trailing spaces, not the spaces which are in between, that cannot be handled. All right, so we'll meet you again in the next video with another interesting input. Until then, take care of yourself. Signing off, Hariharan.